Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Gemini Beauty believes in beauty for a cause, and in their case, the cause is lupus. The team at Gemini is changing the skincare game for good. We thank GSK for their focus on autoimmune disease and their continued support of Lupus LA. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast from Lupus LA. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and thanks to our sponsors, Gemini Beauty and GSK, for allowing us to share stories like we're going to tell you today about lupus. Joining me today is Charissa Barsos. Charissa is a nurse practitioner who specializes in diabetes and works in tribal health. So we're going to talk about all of that as we get going. But you're also a lupus patient, and that is, of course, why you're here on this podcast. So tell me a little bit about, welcome to the show, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me, I know you were diagnosed sort of in your teenage, like early 20s, right?
I was diagnosed in my 30s, actually.
In your 30s, but your symptoms were early, right? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I started symptoms around 11 or 12 and went to Mayo Clinic, and they said I probably had an autoimmune disease, but I wasn't quite there, and they didn't want to label me with anything. So
tell me what those symptoms were that sort of got you headed in that direction.
I have a lot of neurological symptoms with my lupus, unfortunately. So I have seizures, and I've had those since I was in my, early childhood years. Even my mom even remembers it like when I was a baby, like 6, 7, 8 months old. And then I also have, it almost looks like I'm drunk. So I walk weird, and then I can slur my words. So, I mean, that's the only thing I can kind of compare it to that people would really understand.
And that even happened when you were that young.
Yeah. And then I also had headaches. That was kind of the major thing I went to. The seizures, the headaches were the major thing I went to Mayo for. And the headaches don't, affect me as much anymore, which is good. But that's kind of what I went to Mayo for.
And so you're a young girl. They're sending you to, arguably one of the best medical diagnostic facilities in the world. What's going through your head? Like what does that do to your childhood?
Yeah, so I missed a lot of school. I also was told a lot that I was faking it. So I questioned myself a lot. Like, am I faking it? Like, do I really just want attention? And I know in my heart of hearts that's not true. I truly was experiencing these symptoms. But, when you're a young kid and you have doctors telling you this, you really question yourself and kind of question everything that you're going through.
And how does that affect things like your friendships, your relationship with your family? Yeah. Were they sort of in your court, or did they believe the doctors that?
Oh, my mom and my grandma were very much in my corner. My grandma actually paid for me to go to Mayo, so we paid out of pocket. I didn't have any insurance coverage whatsoever. But I did have people that questioned me as well. So I didn't have a ton of friendships, but the friendships I did have were, very deep, and still friends with a lot of those people today. So if that tells you.
And so as you move so you really weren't being treated for anything in those years.
No, I wasn't.
And then you get into your 20s, and how does that change things?
So, it's hard to be an adult and not have a diagnosis or a treatment plan, and try and work and, have a child, because I had a child at 18. I got pregnant at 17. So, between trying to work, have a child. My husband was in Afghanistan at the time. He's a veteran. So I was trying to do all the things, plus deal with a major illness that no one had diagnosed. And that's really hard. I missed a lot of work. I lost a couple jobs because of it. I mean, it was hard. It was hard to deal with.
And do you think the pregnancy changed your symptoms at all?
My first pregnancy didn't. My second pregnancy definitely did. So
Mm-hmm.
my first pregnancy, it was about the same, maybe a little worse, but not too much. But that second pregnancy, man, it quite literally almost killed me, and really, really changed my symptoms.
Was that the second pregnancy also pre-diagnosis?
That was pre-diagnosis. Yep,
All pre-diagnosis. So
all
this whole
pre-diagnosis.
time, you're not being really treated for any of this, anything.
Nope, nope.
And you're kind of muscling through.
Yep. It was hard. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
still hard, and even with the
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis, that the second pregnancy, unfortunately, I did lose my daughter at 21 weeks because I had preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome, and I went into multi-organ failure. So I almost died. My daughter, unfortunately, did die. And then after that, my symptoms went like on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And they were thinking like porphyria. They were thinking, autoimmune. They were looking at all kinds of crazy things.
Did that ultimately lead to the diagnosis?
Yeah, so moving to California is actually what led to my diagnosis. So I finally found a rheumatologist that was willing to listen to me, and I actually remember that appointment very clearly because I went in. I was like, "I'm gonna fight. I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to go to battle for this." And I wasn't even really listening because I just was so ready to fight for myself. And then she was like, talking about all these symptoms and all my, all these labs and all these things. And she's like, well, quite clearly, these people are stupid and you have lupus. And I was like, wait, what? Hold
Right.
on a minute. Someone actually believes me? I mean, she literally said that too. I can remember clearly like what she said. And I was like, hold on. I don't have to fight. Like you actually believe
Mm-hmm.
what I said? Um, because she asked me at the beginning, she's like, what do you think you have? And I was like, I have an autoimmune disease. I don't know what it is, whether you want to call it lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or something else. I know that I have an autoimmune disease, and she agreed with me. So
Hmm.
it was quite funny though how she worded it.
And how did that, I mean, that must give you such relief and
It did.
validation.
It did. It really, really did. Because I went through pretty much my entire life, except for the last 5 years, thinking maybe I'm faking it. Maybe I am making it up. Maybe it's really not as bad as I think it is. And she just validated everything that I was going through. And it really did help me feel validated in that I actually am going through something. And it's pretty, major what I'm going through.
I love it when a good rheumatologist does their job.
Me too. Me
That is
too.
always on this podcast. That is always a turning point in someone's life.
Yeah, a good rheumatologist, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally. So I want to go back a little bit. What line of, when you said you were losing work and things like that, what line of work were you in at that time?
I was a nurse practitioner, a young nurse practitioner.
Okay.
I'd only been, and that was right after I lost my daughter too. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
pretty hard time.
I'm
And I
sure.
just wasn't working very much just because I physically couldn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
mentally couldn't do it. And so I had only been a nurse practitioner maybe a year.
And do you think, was that career choice? I always find it interesting when patients go into the medical field. Was that career choice sort of a natural bringing together of those two things?
Yeah, so I went into this field because I wanted to validate people and to actually listen. And, a lot of people, when they say, hey, there's something wrong with me, usually they're right. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's not too many people that are truly mentally ill where there's just not something wrong with them,
Right.
right? So I went into this field wanting to listen to people, and I've diagnosed some really rare stuff because I truly, truly listen to my patients. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole reason I went into this, was because of how I was treated as a kid.
That's really incredible. Let me do this. I want to take a break because I think this is a good spot to take a break.
Okay.
And then we will come back and talk. I want to talk about your life as a nurse practitioner and how that relates to lupus. So we'll be right back with more from Charissa.
Lupus LA's Facebook Live Chat series connects leading lupus and health experts with our community to answer the most current and important questions. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
Hello and welcome back to the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. We're talking to Charissa Barsos. And before the break, we were talking about a little bit about why you became a nurse practitioner. Let me ask you this. When you were studying, so when you started, you were still pre-diagnosis. Okay. So when you're going through the process of learning about becoming a nurse practitioner, did that sort of solidify in your mind that you had an autoimmune disease?
Oh, 1,000,000%. Just learning about it, I was like, this is what I have. It just makes sense between the symptoms. And I really thought I had lupus, but I'm not a rheumatologist and these things can be very tricky. So I was like, well, I'm open-minded in the fact that maybe it's not lupus, but I know I have an autoimmune disease, which is why I went into that appointment wanting to fight, because I knew I had an autoimmune disease.
Yeah. And so after that appointment, you get treatment, presumably. How does that change your life?
So it's definitely helped. I'm still, 5 years in, still trying to find the right treatment for me. My lupus is very hard to treat. There's really no protocols left. So we're kind of going off label a lot of things. And
tell me why, because I know we talked about this before, but tell me why your lupus is so unique.
So I have, the physical, neurological, joint pain, all those kind of symptoms, but I also have skin symptoms. So that in the way my skin presents, I have what's called a vasculopathy. So what that means is that there's blood cells that clump together. So your white blood cells that, fight infection. So those, of course, in autoimmune diseases are what cause the issue. So those clump together and make my skin die. So it's a lot of fun in the fact that it really does hurt. I'm sure. We're trying to find a way to treat it. Haven't found quite the right treatment. I've started 2 new medicines even in the last month or a few months. And it doesn't look like this one's going to work either. So
and what are the symptoms of that? So that is it just pain in your skin?
So pain in my skin, and I have very large sores, very, very large.
In those areas where the vasculopathy.
And I also have them internally, so we don't really know if those are actually vasculopathies. They're just going based on what I feel. But they very much feel the same. So I'm assuming that's what they are, but no one wants to actually go in there and take a look, which is understandable.
Right. Interesting. Okay, so you become a nurse practitioner. Tell me what led you to working in the Native American community.
Well, so I came out to California. I actually had a job before I worked at Tribal Health, and I became friends with a chiropractor, and he worked in both places. He's like, hey, come over here. It's a little better. And I just fell in love with it. I just feel like I found my calling in life. I really appreciate, the Native culture and just the people. And I don't know. I feel like, I don't know, when you found your calling, you just understand what I mean. I just feel like I found my calling.
I understand that for sure. And I know lupus in the Native American community is more prevalent than in a lot of other communities. What do you see in your practice in terms of autoimmune illness?
So a lot of things undiagnosed because unfortunately the Native community, it's harder to get people to take care of that community, which is crazy in 2024, but it does happen. But a lot of rheumatoid arthritis, I have seen some lupus, a lot of things undiagnosed, which I think are probably lupus, but it's just not diagnosed yet. Even some MS type stuff.
And do you think that you're able to shed some light for some of those people and push them to visit rheumatologists, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it takes a while to build that trust. But once I get that trust, I really just slowly kind of edge them in that direction until they're ready. So I have some people that are like ready within a few weeks. I have some people I've been working with for several years that were slowly getting a diagnosis, and they kind of disappear for a little while and then they come back and we start working on it again. So it just kind of depends on the person and how they've been treated, unfortunately, by the medical field.
Yeah, give me an example. Give me an example of somebody that you really feel like your lupus diagnosis has led to sort of saving them and getting them a lupus diagnosis.
Yeah, so I have a couple of people come to mind that I think have lupus, but they haven't been diagnosed yet. But they have very similar symptoms to me. Maybe not the skin issues, but like some of the neurological things. And they thought maybe MS, but it's not MS, and I really think it's lupus. But I'm not a rheumatologist, unfortunately. Maybe that will be my next career in a second life.
It should be. It should be.
But unfortunately, I'm not a rheumatologist. So, I just keep inching him toward finding the right rheumatologist, because sometimes it's just finding that right person that truly is going to listen to you, which I very much understand.
And I know diabetes is sort of your specialty. Tell me a little bit about how you feel like the two intersect.
Well, so, diabetes, we still are learning, especially about type 2, and I have a lot of type 1s and type 2s. So type 1, of course, is an autoimmune disease.
Correct.
Your pancreas just doesn't work correctly. And, I think there's some type 2s that kind of lean that way too. Not all type 2s by any means, but I have some people that it's just like, I can't really treat them without insulin. And you would think that with all these new medications that I could get them off insulin, but it's just not possible. But I think it's just because the pancreas is so damaged.
Yeah. And so now that you found your diagnosis and you found your calling, how do you think what do you think the future looks like for you in terms of your lupus and your general health?
Well, I'm hoping that we find the right treatment for me. So, I mean, that's, always a hope. My hope is that, I mean, we're looking at maybe even like trials and stuff like that. So maybe I can help someone by doing a trial, or education, stuff like this, where I can do a podcast and just talk about my own, story. Maybe that'll inspire someone else, or give a rheumatologist some things to look at that's not normal in a lupus patient. Just, all kinds of stuff like that. I love advocating. So advocating, is a big thing that I do in my practice. So
tell me a little bit about, I have two questions. Number one, are you still with the same rheumatologist that diagnosed you originally?
No, she unfortunately moved to LA.
I guess it's okay that we got her in LA. That's terrific.
Yeah. I was like, I'll fly to you, but it doesn't quite work that way, unfortunately.
No, it's tricky. It's tricky. But so you mentioned clinical trials. I think that's a really interesting topic that we don't talk about too much on the podcast, but I would love to get your thoughts, because I'm sure you've seen both sides of it. Why do you think it's important for people to be open to clinical trials?
Well, so I know clinical trials is scary because you don't know everything about the trial, but it's so important because without those trials, we would not have new medication, or new treatment options. So if you're not willing to be in a trial, there's no way of, even if it's not going to help your kids, if heaven forbid they get lupus, or your grandkids, or someone else in the community. So clinical trials are so important.
And we can Lupus LA has a lot of links to some of those clinical trials that are available for lupus patients, so we'll put those up, or you can go to lupusla.org to see. We've been partnering a lot with clinical trial companies and have had a lot of success bringing patients, because I think one of the most challenging aspects of clinical trials is that sometimes they take so long to fill up with enough patients to
Yeah.
measure the efficacy of the drug that some of these drugs don't come to market
Yeah.
as
Which is
fast as
so
they could.
unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. It really is. It really is. So what's your advice for somebody who, I have a feeling I know the answer to this question, but somebody who knows in their heart that they may have an autoimmune disease and they just aren't being listened to?
Keep pushing. Find that right doctor. Sometimes it's finding the right primary care doctor. Sometimes it's finding the right rheumatologist, but keep pushing because someone is going to listen. You will find the right person. It may be 30 years, but you will find that right person. So just
Excellent.
keep going and, do a lot of research on your own. Patients really come in and really, even in my own practice, come in and they have a good idea of what they think might be going on. And a lot of times they are right. So, do your own research but also be open to what your doctor has to say because they did go to, school for this too.
Excellent advice. Hopefully it doesn't take 30 years. Charissa, thank you. Yeah, but I think the advice is really sound. Charissa, thank you so much for joining the podcast, for sharing your story. We wish you continued success in your practice and with your health.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.